It happened on Christmas Eve in the middle of a room filled with warm lights, polished silverware, and 22 people who had no idea they were about to witness the moment my entire world changed. My name is Amelia Liam, and that night I learned how quickly respect can shatter the same way a treasured object hits the floor and breaks. The dining room was glowing with soft gold light. The table was set with white porcelain, cloth napkins folded neatly, and candles flickering in quiet harmony. I had spent 3 days preparing that dinner. For me, it was more than a celebration. It was a chance to keep my family close, to hold on to the hope that things could still be repaired. My son Theodore sat at my right, his wife Elijah sat beside him, dressed in red silk, her smile sharp enough to cut through glass. I had tried for years to bond with her, to make space for her in my home and in my heart, but that night she made it painfully clear that I had been offering my kindness to the wrong person. After dessert, I handed Theodore's gift, a small wooden box, polished and simple. Inside was the pocket watch that had belonged to 4 generations of Liam men. My grandfather Oliver, it during the hardest years of his life. My late husband kept it in his coat pocket every day of our marriage. It was more than a watch, it was a legacy. Theodore's eyes filled with emotion as he held it. Thank you, Mom, he whispered. It is perfect. Then Elijah reached for it. She turned the watch in her fingers, her face twisting with irritation. This is it, she said. Scratched old watch. Before anyone could react, she dropped it. The sound echoed across the table, a clean, sharp crack that silenced the entire room. The crystal shattered on the hardwood floor. No one moved, no one spoke, and Theodore, my only son, sat frozen beside her. 38 seconds passed before he said anything, long enough for me to understand exactly how alone I truly was. That was the night everything broke, not just the watch, but the last piece of patience I had left. Long before that Christmas night, long before Elijah ever walked into our lives, the watch had been a symbol of everything my family stood for. To understand why its loss cut so deeply, you would need to know where it came from and what it meant. I grew up in a small town outside Nashville. My family did not have much, but we had grit. My grandfather Henry Liam ran a modest hardware shop with a stubborn kind of pride. He believed in working with your hands, in fixing what was broken, and in treating people with decency, even when it was not returned. When he turned 21, Henry's father gave him the pocket watch. He told him that man's worth was measured not by the money he made, but by the integrity he Oliver, my grandfather, wore that watch every day until he handed it to my husband Daniel the year we married. Daniel kept the same tradition. He Oliver it with him when we opened our first hardware store when Theodore was born. Even during the long nights when we had barely enough money to keep the lights on before he passed, he placed the watch into my palm and said something I never forgot: protect the legacy, and protect our boy. So I did. For more than 20 years I ran the business alone. I woke up before sunrise, balanced inventory by hand, and rebuilt what life tried to take from us. Theodore grew up in that store. He learned how to stack lumber, how to talk to customers, how to show up even when he was tired. We were a team in every sense of the word, which is why it hurt so deeply to see how far we had drifted. The boy who once held my hand as we locked up the shop at night was now a man who could not look me in the eyes while his wife insulted everything his father and grandfather had built. That watch was ever about its value. It was a reminder of where we came from. And on that night when it cracked against the floor, something inside me cracked too. Elijah Quinn entered up. Lives on an ordinary afternoon, the kind of day you forget until something unforgettable happens. Theodore met her at a local business conference in Phoenix, where she introduced herself as a branding consultant for small companies. She had a firm handshake, a polished smile, and an online presence that sparkled brighter than any truth behind it. From the moment I shook her hand, something in my chest tightened. It was not jealousy, it was not fear of losing my son, it was instinct, the kind mothers learn to trust after years of raising children and watching people Come and go, Elijah looked at Theodore. The way a real estate agent looks at a house. She wants to flip, calculating, appraising, already planning the remodel. At first, everything seemed harmless. She laughed at Theodore's jokes, complimented his ambition, and pretended to take interest in our hardware stores. She would sit in my kitchen with a cup of tea, legs crossed, a perfect smile on her face, asking questions that sounded caring but pried a little too deeply. How much revenue do the stores make each quarter? Does Theodore have access to all the accounts? Do you ever think about retiring early? I answered politely, but inside my guard grew taller by the week. Within 3 months, Theodore was head over heels. Elijah posted photos of their dates online, each one filtered to perfection. She called him her person, her better half, her future. Her captions were sweet, but her eyes and ever smiled in them. I tried to reason with Theodore. You barely know her, I said. Love takes time, he shrugged it off. You worry too much, Mom. Elijah understands me, she makes me feel seen. That sentence echoed in my mind, not because it was true, but because I knew exactly how it had been planted. Elijah was smart, beautiful, charming when she needed to be, and beneath that charm was a quiet hunger I could not yet name, but soon enough she would make it clear. Not long after the wedding, the atmosphere in my home began to change. At first it was subtle, almost easy to dismiss, a comment here, a suggestion there, then like water seeping under a door. The shift became impossible to ignore. It started when Theodore and Elijah asked to stay with me just for a few months while they looked for a place of their own. I did not love the idea, but I opened my home. That is what mothers do. They make space, they adjust, they hope. Those few months stretched into a year, then another. Elijah treated my house as if it were an outdated showroom waiting for her approval. She moved decorations, replaced throw pillows, and rearranged furniture without asking. One afternoon, I came home to find the framed photo of my late husband and me taken on our 10th anniversary missing from the living room wall. Where's my picture? I asked. She gestured casually toward the hallway. I put it in your rooms. The living room should feel modern, personal. Items make it look old. Old, that was the word she used often, as if it were an insult instead of a stage of life she would one day reach. Her mother, Donna, arrived next, suitcases in hand. No warning, no request. She claimed she had been evicted and needed a place to recover. Before I could finish processing her story, she had chosen the guest room and settled in like a long-term tenant. From that day on, both women acted as though my home belonged to them. They whispered whenever I walked into a room. They criticized my cooking, my clothes, even the way I folded laundry. Theodore tried to ignore it, but slowly I watched him drift further from me, wrapped in the fog of their influence. The home I had built with love and memory became unrecognizable, a place where my presence felt like an intrusion, a place where I suddenly needed permission to exist. And for the first time, I wondered just how much more I would lose before the truth finally came out. The turning point came on a quiet Wednesday afternoon. I was reviewing routine store invoices when something unusual caught my eye, a charge from a luxury boutique I had never heard of. At first I assumed it was a mistake, but then I found another charge and another, one larger than the last. Confusion became unease, one became dread. Company credit card that Theodore used for vendor payments and travel expenses suddenly showed purchases from high-end restaurants, designer stores, and spa packages, none of which had anything to do with hardware, lumber, or tools. I waited until he came home. Theodore, what are these charges? He barely looked up from his phone. Oh, those. Elijah needed a few things. It is fine, Mom, we are married. What is mine is hers. I felt my stomach drop. Married or not, the company card was not his personal wallet. It was the lifeline of our family business. When I pressed further, Elijah appeared in the doorway, arms crossed, voice dripping with annoyance. Why are you interrogating him? He bought gifts for his wife. That is normal. You make it sound like a crime. It is not about gifts, I said quietly. It is about Boundaries. She laughed a soft, dismissive sound. Boundaries, that is a funny word coming from someone who cannot cut the cord. Theodore stiffened, Elijah wrapped her arm around him as if shielding him from my concern. She is always judging me, Theodore. She and Ivor wanted us here, the lie rolled off her tongue with practiced ease. That night after they retreated upstairs, I sat alone at the dining table with my laptop and opened Ivory account tied to the company. What I found turned my fear into cold, silent rage. Over the past 3 years, Elijah had spent more than $1.07 million company vehicles, resort trips, designer jewelry, private spa clubs, and a wedding so extravagant it swallowed nearly a year of profits. And Theodore had no idea. He thought they were sharing expenses. He thought Elijah was managing their budget responsibly, but she had created a world made of illusions, funded by the business I had sacrificed my life building. That was the night I realized this was not simply a matter of personality or misunderstanding. It was exploitation. Calculated and deliberate, and it was only going to get worse. 2 weeks later, everything became unmistakably clear. It happened on a late Friday afternoon when I came home earlier than usual. I had closed a major wholesale contract and wanted to share the good news with Theodore. I walked quietly through the hallway, expecting to find him in the kitchen. Instead, I heard Elijah's voice. She was on a video call speaker on full volume, her tone nothing like the sugary sweetness she used around Theodore. I swear I cannot take it anymore, she complained. Living here is exhausting, but it is fine. A few more months and this whole place will be ours. My heart stumbled. Her friend asked, what if she leaves everything to someone else? Elijah laughed a sharp, confident sound. She will not. Amelia is predictable. She will give everything to Theodore, and when he inherits, I inherit. That is how marriage works. I stood frozen in the hallway, gripping the wall to steady myself. My pulse hammered in my ears, but I forced myself to listen. Theodore does whatever I tell him, Elijah continued. He thinks he is protecting me. Please, I can manipulate him with 2 sentences. Everything inside me went still. This was no misunderstanding, no miscommunication, no harmless selfishness. This was a plan she had been crafting since the day she set foot in our home. Carefully, quietly, I stepped back down the hallway, out the door, and sat in my car. I played the recording I had captured on my phone, her voice echoing back at me. For the first time since she entered our lives, I saw her without illusions, and I understood exactly what I had to do. When Christmas Ivy arrived, the house looked warm and peaceful from the outside. Lights glowed along the porch rail, the tree sparkled in the corner, and the dining table was set for 22 guests. But beneath all that beauty was a calm I had constructed with purpose. This was the night I would finally put an end to everything. Elijah entered in a shimmering gold dress, her confidence as bright as the sequins on her sleeves. Donna followed, smiling as if she owned the place. Theodore stayed close to them, unaware he was standing at the edge of a truth that would change his life. Dinner moved along smoothly, laughter, small talk, clinking glasses. Elijah posed for photos like she always did, positioning herself near the tree, then near the fireplace, then at the head of the table. Ivory shot carefully angled. Ivory smile rehearsed. After dessert, I stood. It is time for gifts. Elijah clapped her hands, thrilled. I ignored her excitement and handed Theodore a small wooden box. His face softened when he saw what was inside. Mom, you restored it, he whispered. Before he could say more, Elijah snatched the watch from his hands. Let me see, what has you so emotional? She turned it over once, twice, then sighed loudly. It is the same old thing. I thought it would at least be worth something. Then she dropped it. The watch hit the hardwood floor with a crisp crack that sliced through the room. Gas rippled across the table. Donna covered a laugh with a napkin. Theodore stared in shock, frozen again, just like before. This time I did not let the silence linger. Since we are being honest tonight, I said, I have a few things to share as well. I walked to the sideboard and picked up a thick folder. Inside were the printed financial statements Ivory charged she had made on the company account highlighted and totaled $1.7 million. The room shifted, chairs creaked. Someone whispered under their breath. Then I pulled out my phone and pressed play. Elijah's voice filled the dining room. Ivory word she had said. Ivory plan. Ivory manipulation. Ivory lie. When the recording ended, the house felt impossibly still. Elijah's face drained of color. Donna looked ready to faint. Theodore stared at me, eyes wide, breathing uneven. I finally turned to Elijah. Your car is being repossessed tonight. The keys, please. A tow truck's headlights flashed through the window at that exact moment, and for the first time since she entered my life, Elijah Quinn had nothing left to say. For a long moment, no one in the room moved. Elijah stood frozen beside the table, her fingers curled tightly around the back of a chair as if it were the only thing keeping her upright. Donna stared at the floor, avoiding Ivory's set of eyes in the room, and Theodore, my son, looked like a man watching the pieces of his life fall apart in slow motion. Mom, he whispered, barely breathing, is all of this true? I nodded once. Ivory word. He swallowed hard, turning toward Elijah. She would not look at him. Her eyes stayed fixed on the folder of financial statements as if staring long enough might change the numbers printed on the page. Elijah finally lifted her chin. This is an attack, she snapped. She planned this to embarrass me. She hates me. She always has. This is not about hate, I said quietly. It is about responsibility. Theodore's voice cracked. Did you really spend company money? Did you really say those things about my mother? Elijah opened her mouth, but no sound came. For the first time, she seemed unsure of her own words. Theodore pressed a hand to his forehead. All this time I thought Mom was being unfair. I thought you were the one being hurt, but it was all lies. All of it. Elijah reached for him. Theodore. Baby, listen. He stepped back so quickly she froze mid-sentence. Do not call me that, he said, voice hollow. Not right now. His face crumpled. I let you come between us. I believed things that were never true. I treated my mother like she was the problem when she was the only one trying to protect me. I walked toward him, slowly, placing a hand on his shoulder. You see clearly now. That is enough. Tears slipped down his cheeks, quiet and unsteady. I am so sorry, Mom. Around us, the guests shifted awkwardly, unsure whether to stay or slip away, but in that moment nothing and no one mattered, except the truth finally settling into place. My son had woken up, and once you see the truth, you cannot unsee it. 3 days passed after the Christmas disaster, and in that short time, Elijah's perfect world began to crumble. Piece by piece. Influence, after all, is a fragile thing. It shines brightly online, but it shatters quickly when real life steps in. On the morning of the third day, she showed up at my store. No makeup, no polished hair, her coat wrinkled, her eyes swollen. She looked nothing like the woman who used to glide through my kitchen with a camera in hand. Amelia, she said, her voice shaking. We need to talk, I set aside the inventory list in front of me. About what? Everything is falling apart, she whispered. I lost 2 brand deals. People are calling me a liar. My followers are turning against me, and Theodore, he blocked my number. She paced the office, running her hands through her hair. I do not know what to do. I need help. I watched her quietly, not with anger, not with satisfaction, simply with understanding. Life was finally showing her what accountability felt like. When she finally stopped packing, she faced me with trembling lips. Amelia, please, I need you to talk to Theodore. Tell him this is not who I really am. Tell him I can change. I asked her the question she had avoided for years. Do you love my son, or do you love the life he gave you? She froze. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. You treated love like a ladder, Elijah. I said you climbed it, used it, expected it to hold your weight without giving anything back. She blinked rapidly as tears spilled down her cheeks. I know, she whispered. I know I messed up, but I do not know how to live without him. My voice softened, but my resolve did not. Then you need to learn. You need to stand up on your own feet for the first time in your life, because The version of comfort you built was not love, it was dependency dressed as glamour. She swallowed hard, her voice barely there. Does he hate me? No, I replied. He sees you clearly now. That is not hate, that is clarity. Her shoulders sank, she nodded a small, broken movement. For once she did not argue, and that was the first honest moment I had ever seen from her. Following week felt strangely quiet, as if the whole house was holding its breath. Theodore stayed with me during that time, sleeping in the small room he used. As a teenager, he barely spoke the first couple of days, moving through the house like someone trying to relearn how to breathe. On the fourth morning, he finally sat down at the kitchen table, both hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. Mom, he said softly, I think I know what I have to do. I waited. He stared at the table, his voice barely above a whisper. I cannot stay married to someone who used me, who used our business, who used you. I cannot build a life with someone who only loved the comfort, not the commitment. The words seemed to drain the strength from his body, but at the same time I saw something new in his eyes: resolve, maturity, a heartbreak that was leading him back to himself. He met with an attorney that same afternoon. The separation papers were straightforward. There were no children, no shared assets worth fighting over, nothing binding them together except a marriage built on illusions. When Elijah received the notice, she called the store 9 times. Theodore answered none of them. She showed up once, standing outside in the parking lot, shivering the cold, pleading for him to talk. He stayed inside, watching from the office window, grief tightening his jaw. She finally left with her shoulders slumped, the wind tugging at her coat like even the weather had grown tired of her dramas. A week later, he signed the final documents. Afterward, he came home, sat beside me on the sofa, and took a long breath. I thought losing her would break me, he said quietly, but I think what broke me was realizing how far I drifted from myself. You are finding your way back, I told him. That is the part that matters. He leaned his head back, eyes closed. I want to rebuild my life, and I want to do it right this time. And in that quiet living room, with winter light settling softly across the floor, I knew he would. The weeks that followed felt like watching winter melt into early spring. Nothing changed overnight, but every day brought a small sign of healing. Theodore woke earlier. He cooked breakfast instead of skipping it. He started jogging again the way he used to before his life became tangled in Elijah's expectations. One morning, he came into the kitchen wearing his old work shirt, the navy one with the faded store logo. I want to go back, he said, not as a manager, not as the owner's son. I want to start where I should have started years ago, stocking shelves, helping customers, earning my place back. The pride that filled my chest was quiet but strong. I nodded. Then that is exactly what you will do. And he did, for the first time in years. Theodore walked into the store with humility instead of assumptions. He swept floors, unloaded trucks, stacked merchandise, and asked questions instead of pretending he already knew the answers. The employees noticed. They respected the effort, the change in his tone, the way he listened instead of leading with ego. I watched from a distance at first, then one afternoon I saw him laughing with a customer, genuinely laughing, and I realized he was not just rebuilding his job, he was rebuilding himself. At home, we talked more, not about Elijah or the past, but about the business, about life, about the future. Sometimes we sat outside on the porch, sipping tea in the cold evening air, letting silence speak for us. Sometimes healing does not come from big speeches, it comes from small consistencies. One evening, he handed me a small velvet pouch. Open it, he said. Inside were the repaired pieces of the pocket watch, the glass replaced, the chain polished, the hands moving again. It looks exactly the same, I whispered. He smiled softly. It will last another 4 generations if we take care of it. As I held it in my palm, warm from his hand, I knew the truth. Some things break so they can be rebuilt stronger, and some relationships are worth the work it takes to restore them. A full year passed before I fully understood how much life can change when truth is Allowed to step in, the following. Christmas arrived quietly without extravagance or tension, without rehearsed smiles or hidden agendas. It was the first holiday in a long time that felt like home. The house was warm, with simple decorations, pine branches. On the mantel, a single strand of lights. Around the window, no gold sequin. Dresses, no staged photo, just peace. The kind of peace that settles in, slowly filling the spaces where chaos once lived. Theodore arrived early carrying a plate of homemade rolls. He looked healthier, more grounded, more himself. Months of steady work and honest reflection had softened his shoulders and sharpened his focus. He was no longer a man trapped inside someone else's expectations. He had grown back into the man his father would have been proud of. During dinner, he reached into his coat pocket and placed a small wrap box in front of me. Open it, he said. Inside was the restored pocket watch, gleaming with new life. The engraving had been polished, the hands moving in steady rhythm. I wanted you to have it back today, he said. I think Dad would want it this way. I closed my hand around the watch, feeling the weight of every generation that had all over it. My grandfather, my husband, my son. The legacy was not just in the metal, it was in the resilience behind it. Later that night, as we stood by the window watching snow fall across the yard, Theodore spoke quietly. Mom, thank you for not giving up on me. I smiled. We all lose our way sometimes. What matters is finding the road back. He nodded, his breath fogging the glass. I am ready for whatever comes next, and I believed him because the past year had taught us something powerful. Families can break, hearts can crack, traditions can falter, but with truth, courage, and time, some legacies do more than survive. They shine brighter than before.